Good afternoon and welcome to today's webinar brought to you by Enterprise Nation. My name is Kat Elliott. I'm the Chief Operating Officer here at the company, and we are going to be joined shortly by Nick Brackenbury from NearSt. Today's webinar is part of Enterprise Nation's Go and Grow online campaign, which is here to encourage more businesses to get online and to support existing online traders to grow. We're very pleased to say the campaign is supported by 123Reg, VeriSign and Microsoft. And for more information on the series, you can go to enterprisenation.com/go and grow. As I mentioned, we're delighted to have Nick with us today. He's the co-founder and CEO of e-commerce startup NearSt, which is a fantastically useful site on a mission to get people back into their local shops. I was just having a look to see a gift that I need to buy urgently is only 40 minutes away from me, so already delighted to see that in use. And he's kindly going to talk to us today about how he started the business, why some of the challenges that he faced, and how he's making it a success. So welcome, Nick.
Thanks so much, and really good to be here.
Thank you for joining us. I'm going to dive straight into questions. So if you could perhaps tell us why you decided to start the business.
Yeah, sure thing. It was a quite literal light bulb moment that got us started with NearSt. My co-founder Max, who lives up in Angel, was having some friends over for a party one evening, and light bulb went in his living room. And so, you know, he got out his phone and did what most of us did, and he searched for it, and he said, you know, where can I find a 40-watt Philips LED light bulb near me? And his phone showed him all these places he could order online, but didn't tell him anywhere he could actually get it nearby. And so he ended up wandering around all of his local DIY shops for the best part of an hour, kind of going in and out to 5 or 6 different shops. Until he eventually found it in a shop that was all of 100 meters from his front door, but if he turned right instead of left when he first started. He just sort of thought, yeah, this is crazy, that it's easier for me to order something from a warehouse hundreds of miles away than get it from a shop 100 meters from my front door. And it's that kind of spark that set us off, and we started talking to people, did some research. We found actually this is a huge growing area of difficulty for people, and a way that people are increasingly trying to shop, and got started from there.
Wonderful, and I think obviously it's extremely sort of important to tap into that feeling that people have in order to support businesses local to them as well. It's obviously something that's very pertinent at the moment. It's sort of in culture generally, so I can see why the idea was that light bulb moment, literally, and an extremely useful one. Obviously, you're sort of balancing that online side of things with also sort of traditional retail and bricks and mortar. So, could you tell us a bit more about how you've built an online platform that does work with traditional retail?
Yeah, so we started out, as I think many technology companies do, thinking, yep, great, we're going to build some technology and it'll solve everything. But in order to build this marketplace, of course, you need shops on board. So we actually started very early on, before we'd even finished the first version of the platform, Boris biking our way around London. And we visited, I think it was something like 150 shops over 6 weeks, and cycled something like 250 miles by Boris bike, which I really highly recommend against. They're really heavy things. But what it gave us, though, is a real insight into the way local businesses and local shops work that was totally different to what we expected. And to give you an idea, when we started the business, we thought, right, we're going to sell every shop an iPad with our inventory system on, and that's how we'll know what's in stock. And to start the business, though, we'll give it away for free, and just to get our first customers on. And no one wanted this iPad, even when it was totally free. So we're like, we're giving people £500 of tech here, and no one even wants it. And it's kind of moments like that where you have real interactions rather than just desk research that's, I think, really important to building the first version of anything. And that early knowledge and those early relationships with high street retailers proved really fundamentally important to the platform we built today, and how it works and how we work with retailers.
Well, I think that's a challenge that wouldn't, of course, occur to you, imagining that people wouldn't want to be handed that much tech for free. It's that sort of research, as you say, that's so pivotal. What would you say some of the other challenges that you faced are?
I think it's a lot of small and medium-sized businesses are understandably very skeptical of things that different groups try to sell to them, because there are tons of different people that want to sell to small businesses. And it's almost like the better the proposition you come with, the more skeptical they're going to be. It's kind of like, is this too good to be true? So the way we work with retailers is there's no setup fee. You can kind of get started really in a couple of hours. And then we only charge what is a pretty modest commission on sales that go through the platform. So when you talk to a small business about this, it's like, okay, there's got to be a catch somewhere, and trying to navigate that and build that trust and say, no, there isn't a catch, just we want to get people back into shops. We built a business model that allows us to do that at a pretty competitive rate. Let's have a conversation and trying to understand how you frame that and what the needs are and kind of what really drives and bothers these small and medium-sized retailers was really, really challenging. And learning that is, you know, you can't A/B test it very easily. You can A/B test a website with tens of thousands of users very easily because, you know, you just show half of one thing, half the other. But when your pool of people you're talking to is only 50 or 100 or 200 shops, you don't really want to be A/B testing with that small of a pool of people and potentially losing half of your available shops straight out the gate from the wrong messaging. So it was a little bit tricky at first to kind of learn, how do we talk to and how do we understand these retailers and really speak their language.
And for those people who might not be familiar with NearSt, could you tell us a little bit more about how the interface works to connect those customers with the light bulbs with the retailers that are nearby?
Sure. So NearSt is it's a hyperlocal shopping and discovery platform. People have called us everything from kind of Amazon for your high street to Deliveroo for retail, but ultimately it's a place for customers to browse for a product they want, as that's how most of us shop. We want a thing. We don't usually care that much about where it comes from, but you have an item or something that you're looking to buy. And we allow them to shop as they would on any other online store, except for everything we show them is actually located in a real shop nearby them. And we prioritize everything we show people based on location. So we'll never show someone the cheapest thing first. We'll always show them the closest or most convenient store to them that has it. And if they want to buy something, they go through checkout just as you would on any other online store. So you add something to your basket, you buy it, you enter your card details, you pay. And then that item will either be ready for you to collect in store immediately, so it's not kind of click and collect next day, it's click and collect from the moment you hit buy, or we'll have it delivered to them anywhere down to an hour from when they've bought, or within kind of a 1 hour time window later in the day. So it's trying to bring this convenience of online to shopping in the real world, the way that people shop now, which is, I want a thing, where can I get that thing? And yeah, we started with bookshops, and at the minute we're in the midst of rolling it out to about half a dozen other categories.
Yes, I can see that you've now sort of got health and beauty, which is obviously an incredibly rapidly expanding retail area, as well as toys, gifts, and they're sort of in a testing phase at the moment. Is that right?
Yeah, so they're kind of hidden away behind a little button at the top of the site at the minute, deliberately to do that though, and that's it's kind of defines how we develop things, which is try and launch something as early as you can, even if it's not really fully baked yet, but start to get some early data in. So the customers who click that are kind of the ones who are curious and a little bit more brave or exploratory in how they do things online, and from that we see what are they engaging with across these categories, because that can then help us decide where we're going to put our effort as a company in growing a business.
And to highlight what you were saying earlier about the importance of research and A/B testing, I guess that's another an element of that is understanding what your consumers are actually wanting, and then using that to decide what direction you're going to take the business.
Yeah, exactly, and something we thought about doing but didn't do in the end, but would have been a great way to do this, is just even put the category titles up there and just say, see what people click on. Where do people want to intuitively click? Because if we think DIY is going to be huge, but then no one clicks on the button, even though there's nothing behind it yet, we could waste a lot of time opening up a category no one potentially wants. DIY is a really big one for us, I should say, but just as an example.
Yes, I've just bought a house. I can completely understand that when we were in the midst of box moving over the weekend. So yes, I can see where the platform works. How did you finance the business? How did you get going?
So we started it just with our own money. myself and my co-founder, and we probably ran it for the first 3 or 4 months. Or no, probably a little bit longer actually. Probably about the first 6 months was just running from our living room, coffee shops, and we were still each working our previous jobs at the same time for those first 6 months. So kind of building it in evenings and weekends. And once we got to a point where there was some kind of basic product ready, we were able to get a small amount of investment from family and friends. Again, it was kind of just enough to get us a full-time office and allow us to leave our jobs and kind of run it for a few months to get it to a point where we could get larger investors on. And once we kind of had a product out there in the market working that people could see was working, we had demand, at that point we could go to a mixture of angel investors and venture capital investors, and most of our fundraising to date has been from private angel investors with a little bit of support also from an accelerator program called NearSt, which is part of a private equity firm that exclusively invests in retail, and they've been really, really great at not just bringing money into the business, but bringing kind of advice, connections, expertise. So that's been super, super helpful for us.
Have they almost taken the role of a mentor for the business?
Yeah, and it's kind of a mentor, and it's also it opens a lot of doors. You know, it's one of those things that once you have a name like that behind you, a lot of people will have a conversation with you just because they figure someone else has already done the due diligence of saying, well, these guys are worthwhile backing and talking to, so I'll kind of open the door and give them a seat at the table to speak. So often, you know, it's not always they say that there's smart money and dumb money, and smart money really counts for a lot. Having people who are backing you who also know the area you're in or can really add something to the business. And we've really learned that as we've gone along and had some really great smart investors add a lot more than just their cash to the business.
Interesting. Okay, and you sort of were talking there about you know, that first seed money and how you were working full-time job as well as sort of doing this in evenings and weekends. How's that transition been from juggling both to working full-time? I sense from your chuckle that there's been some excitement and challenges along the way.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure as many people here you know, listening to this webinar, know when you're trying to run two things at once, it's incredibly hectic, and all you want to do is put all your time into the business, and you think, great, once I've finished having to do two jobs at once, I can just focus on this full time, I'll have all the time in the world. And it seems to be this, you know, the more time you put into the business, the more time it demands of you. And so that's been, you know, it's been a really enjoyable transition, but it does sort of absorb all of your life, and that all you want to do in any free moment is work a little bit harder on the business. So I'm sure my long-suffering girlfriend would be able to tell you more about the family and friends commitments that you have to kind of balance carefully. But on a more serious note around that, I think it's a lot of expectation management with the people that you know, your friends and your family, just because they're going to be very excited by it. But it's also it's kind of any free moment you end up looking at it thinking, well, I could spend a little bit more time on the weekend doing this because I don't have anything planned in. But it's, you know, it's been a really fun transition. I think the other thing is you learn to become a generalist very quickly. So I have absolutely no background in law or accounting, but I've had to learn quite a lot about both law and accounting in the last 18 months in order to run the business. And if you don't learn it, you can also do that route, but it'll cost you a lot more money with spending more time with accountants and spending more time with lawyers, just as two examples. Across any area of the business, the less you learn, the more you have to pay someone else to do it.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I think any small business owner can absolutely appreciate the need for that supportive community around you, whether it's, yes, your partner or parents or friends, and how that understanding helps. Can you remember the one moment that you decided, that's it, I'm quitting the job and I'm doing this full time? Was there a tipping point or a general build up?
Good question. So my co-founder, who actually had this light bulb moment. I'd known him for about 5 years, and he was a former colleague at the very beginning of my career in the ad industry. And he told this to me about this idea before Christmas. I was like, that's a great idea, but for sure someone's built this, and they built it at scale. But I kind of went away over the winter and researched it myself, and you know, we sat down, had a few more coffees, and I think it was once I started really diving into the research and looking at what the market looked like, who else was playing in this area, what the trends were, that's when I started to get excited. And once I looked at it and thought, you know what, think we can do this better than anyone else is doing it right now. That was the moment when, once I convinced myself of that I kind of handed in my notice at Ogilvy and got started building what it wasn't even called NearSt at the time back then.
Fantastic. It's amazing what sort of makes people take that leap and make that jump. I think 25% of businesses, I believe, in the UK small businesses are run by people who are also working full time. So it's something that a lot of people can identify with. You mentioned your background there in terms of Ogilvy. Do you have any sort of digital marketing lessons that small businesses can learn from some of the big client work that you did at Ogilvy?
I think what I learned more than anything is that no one in life really knows fully what they're doing. So don't be convinced that just because it's a big, multinational corporation that they kind of really have everything together. But what I really did take away from it is it can be very easy to skip straight past strategy into tactics, particularly with a lot of the tools that are readily available today. And it's actually really hard to take the time and say, no, let's really look at this strategically. Let's really take time to understand our audience and really think, okay, who are the people we want to go after and where do we think they'll be and how can we go after them, rather than jumping into what is often what looks like a very technical, sophisticated channel, like just saying, well, let's run some Facebook ads because Facebook makes it really easy for me to explore and target some audiences and run some tests and see some results. Rather than actually taking a step back and saying, is a Facebook ad even the right thing for me to do, and are the options they give me to target people even the right options? So, really understanding your audience and understanding what channels you're going to use and why, I think is really important. And it's, we made that mistake when we started, like, great, we can now control our own Facebook ads and Twitter ads, and we jumped straight in, and then we wasted a load of money because we didn't really think about how we were using them and if they were even the right ways for us to acquire customers. So understand your audience and really take a step back to understand the strategy, I think.
That's very interesting to hear. What proportion of your sort of promotion would you say is through social media at the moment, given your experience with Facebook at the beginning? Do you still use it, or what other channels do you use instead?
What I would say is it's not consistent in any given month, and that's because we run an ongoing testing program to constantly validate and learn about whether the channels we're using are the right channels at any given time. So in some months, social can be up to 90% of our ad spend. In other months, it'll be all the way down at 5% or maybe even next to zero. And that's because as we're launching in new categories, we're getting a better understanding of our audience and what they're doing. We're having to kind of shift that budget around to see, like, where are we definitely spending, are we definitely spending the money in the right places? And we're still learning that. I wouldn't pretend that we've definitely cracked how to acquire our audience at massive scale yet. So we're just continuing to test and measure everything we do to try and find where they are. And all these platforms as well, every time you think you've got the lay of the land down, they go and add some new features or change how the current features work. And so you have to go back and say, like, right, this channel we ruled out, is it now a relevant channel for us because they've just added a totally new feature or allowed us to target people in a totally different way? So it feels like you can never test them enough.
And I would imagine that obviously as your audience share grows, that then is new data for you to play with and understand, and then that changes what your approach might be.
Yeah, for sure. And at the minute we're in the midst of hiring for a growth marketer to kind of take that on full time, just because there's so much testing and data to crawl through in terms of what's working and what isn't, that it's really a full-time role, and one that a couple of us have been doing. But you really need someone who's you can do it so long for yourself, but then you really benefit from having the skills of someone else that knows really what they're doing, has built a career on it.
Well, that beautifully transitions me on to my sort of last question before we take some questions from the audience, and that is, can you give us a quick roundup on what NearSt's plans for the future are, apart from acquiring staff?
So this year we're super focused on London still. So we're going to continue focusing on building out NearSt as deeply as we can within London. So that is having the best possible network of shops we can to deliver a really incredible experience for customers, so that you really can get pretty much anything you want in just a couple taps of your phone from a shop nearby. And then sometime in 2018, we're going to start rolling this out then to a few near cities. So probably one or two in the UK, and then one nearby in Europe, and just kind of figure out how that works. As kind of booting up a whole new city probably sounds pretty simple in principle, but then we're sure it'll be much more complicated when we get stuck in, and all being well with that, kind of keep going from there. But a long way off still, much to learn about London in the interim.
Well, no, it's an amazing city to launch a new e-commerce business in, I think, and you find yourself in good company, I would hope. But that brings me nicely onto some of the questions that we've got from our audience today, and thank you very much for those of you who have been typing them in. This is partially been answered, but someone asking if you've got plans to expand internationally. But the second portion is, if you do, which markets would you find most appealing?
So we're talking quite a lot with our investors at the minute about this. I think that the areas we're really going to go for are the cities that have seen great uptake from existing on-demand services. So places where Deliveroo and Uber have done really well, places where like TaskRabbit has got a great foothold. So all the technology companies who've really succeeded in this area of kind of, I want my phone to get me something I need in a few taps, whether that's a handyman or a car or a meal, as that's really the kind of audience that we succeed with. So we're looking at a little bit more this summer how we can really follow in the steps of these guys, and if we do follow in the steps of them, to select our next cities. But we don't think in countries, we very much think in cities, as that's kind of how we think the company can grow best.
Makes sense. And thank you for that. You mentioned obviously that you have a marketing background. We also have another question here asking if yourself or your co-founder have a tech and development background.
So we're both techie in the sense that we're kind of geeks and like technology. Neither of us are developers though. So when we started the company, having a really strong and compelling mission was absolutely essential to get kind of really great technical talent on board early. And that's definitely the hardest thing to do in any technology company, is find great developers who can commit to the company and that you don't have to pay kind of a huge salary to upfront. And you really see that in the market. There is a shortage of developers and they're really hard to acquire. So having a compelling mission and a really compelling vision is, I think, pretty essential to get technical talent early on as a company.
Interesting. And would you say that has perhaps been one of the big challenges in launching an online platform?
Absolutely. And we're hiring again at the minute for technical talent, and it's a really difficult process, and particularly the more senior you go, the harder they are to find, because there's not many of them, and most of the good companies, most of the good developers out there rather, are already at great companies who pay them very well. So you have to try and find a way to convince them to come and work at your company. And a lot of that's building, as I say, a great vision and a great mission and a great culture inside the company that is exciting for them to work on, and an exciting problem for them to work on.
Okay, good tip, thank you. Speaking of tips, we have a question here that says, any tips on building early stage products before approaching investors, so product in the technical sense?
I think what investors really want to see is, firstly, they want to see a great team. And that's always the first thing they'll say. They say, who is it that's actually running this and building this? Because very few people build the right thing the first time. And so do you have a team that's smart enough to iterate and learn very quickly from that first thing you build to build it into something that's ultimately something customers really, really want? But in terms of building an early prototype before going to investors, the biggest thing they're going to look for is validation that people kind of want this. You won't get product market fit straight away, or if you do, it's incredibly lucky, but you'll want some sort of indication that this is something here that people want. So we started with just a splash page, and it said, be one of the first to register in London to buy anything from a real shop nearby. And we just put a little bit of money behind some ads, sent those ads out to a bunch of different websites, and we're like, let's just see if anyone actually cares about this. And we had a ton of sign-ups saying, yes, I want to be the first to know when this comes out. So like, great, bit of early validation. And depending on what stage you're at, you can then continue to validate that further. So, what I was talking about earlier, when we're looking at launching into new categories, what we could have done is just put a bunch of buttons at the top of the site that just said shop in DIY, shop in electronics, shop in toys and games, and just see what people click on. There's nothing really behind those buttons. It just says, great, this section's launching soon, but we would know straight away then what people are interested in. So investors just want to see some sort of validation that this is actually something that people want, and you've got some kind of evidence, even if it's small numbers, that people are willing to pay for this or to at least use the thing that you're building.
Absolutely. As you say, it's sort of the online version of footfall, isn't it? Clicking and making that click decision. It can tell you a huge amount.
Exactly.
We have another question here. We just have a few moments left, so I'll try and get in as many as I can. Someone is asking, do you have an app or just an online platform? And if so, why did you make that decision?
So we started as just an iPhone app, and that still exists today. But we very quickly learned that acquiring customers for an app is incredibly expensive because most people don't have any space on their phones. And so you've got to build up a real level of trust and understanding for what you do in order to convince someone to make some space on their phone to have your app there rather than having, the app that gives them directions to work or something like that. So it's a very competitive space. And so what we did is we very quickly moved into having a site supported by an app. And what we have today is most customers use our website, and then our most loyal customers use the app. So if I was doing it again, an app is quicker to develop, but I'd still start with a website. Of course, there are some businesses that only make sense as an app. So I'm not saying it's impossible to start with an app, but for a lot of businesses, it makes more sense to start with a website, I think.
Okay, and sort of on that note of different customers and different users using different things, I've got a question here. Do you work purely with physical stores at the moment?
Yes, we do. We work with any type of physical store. So by that, we're not just a platform for independent stores. We work with larger national chains as well, as we really believe that a healthy high street is comprised of both independent shops and big national chains. What we do is we're very careful in our ethics about who we work with, so we wouldn't work with kind of people with bad working practices or shops that are mega discounters and sort of undermine the rest of the high street. So we try and just have a really good balance of what we think would make up a healthy high street of shops.
Okay, and maybe possibly my penultimate question before we finish, bringing it more back towards your marketing side of things and the consumer. How do you target local community-minded people who are going to care about your product? Are there particular keywords that you use, and how do you grab their attention?
with great difficulty.
Okay.
It's something we're going through and testing and learning about at the minute. So we do a lot of primary research, so actually going out and trying to find these people and meeting them and then trying to learn about where they are, and then working backwards from there to try and figure out what channels makes most sense. So this can be everything from leaflets left in local shops to highly targeted keywords in search, and we're still going through and learning about that. And it really differs for every product category we operate in. So it's something I wouldn't pretend we've solved yet. And I think everyone online is kind of something they're always trying to learn more about and solve for. So sorry, that's not a concrete answer, but it's something we're definitely learning about still.
Well, I think that's an important thing to talk about. Is that sort of, as you say, you've spent the last 18 months learning about accountancy and legal, and anyone starting a small business knows that you're a jack of all trades at the beginning, and you have to keep learning as you go. Which probably brings me on to my final question, which I'm going to cheekily steal back for myself, and just ask if there was one thing that you could do differently in the whole of the journey so far, what would it be?
It's a good question. I think I would change how we release product to release it even more frequently than we have done. So by that I mean committing to smaller changes more often rather than bigger changes less often. So we already release pretty frequently as a company, but we're now getting much, much better at releasing really very frequently, so every few weeks. And the more I see what we're doing now, the more I think, yep, that allows us to kind of iterate and change much faster. And it's in all the startup books. It's in things like the Lean Startup saying release little and often, but it's actually quite hard to do properly. So if I was doing this again, I would definitely build a system and a process and a way of working that allowed us to do that much more effectively and do that right from the very beginning.
Wonderful. That was absolutely fascinating, Nick. Thank you so much. I've really enjoyed speaking with you, and thank you for taking the time to speak with us and Enterprise Nation members and listeners today.
Yeah, you're most welcome, and thank you very much for having me, and hopefully it was useful and interesting for everyone.
Very, very much so. Thank you. And I very much will be having a little look on NearSt again later on myself this afternoon. So thank you very much. And thank you to everybody who tuned in today as to our webinars, part of Enterprise Nation's Go and Grow Online series, as mentioned, supported by 123 Reg, VeriSign and Microsoft. In case it's of use, we'd love for you to find out more about this subject. So we actually have an event on Friday the 26th of May as part of our campaign. It's our Go and Grow Online Summit, and it's a whole day of speakers, sessions, workshops. It's the must-attend digital event of the year to access all of the knowledge that you need to build your digital strategy. Topics will include social media, working in the cloud, SEO, and e-commerce, obviously relevant to our conversation today. So do check out our website, enterprisenation.com, to take a look at those tickets. Next week we have, I've lost my piece of paper, we've got another webinar next week. It's how to get your food and drink product retail ready. So very much look forward to welcoming you to that. Thanks ever so much again, and thank you, Nick.
Thanks, guys.